building confidence and credibility through transparency and professionalism. This is the Constabulary Communication Network, lifting our standards through communication.
Ask yourself, is it coming from someone who is involved in a crime? Should I get other information which corroborates it? And be careful about false leads. I was involved in a case a few years ago. A gentleman called Neville Williams. And Neville Williams was charged with rape and was convicted. He spent 3 years in prison. And then he appealed, and on appeal, the Court of Appeal threw out his conviction and set him free because DNA evidence demonstrated that he could not have been the one to have committed the rape. But when we sued the state, the officer who gave evidence on behalf of the Attorney General, which officer shall remain nameless. That officer, when I cross-examined him, you wouldn't believe the way in which he had approached it. I asked him, "So officer, tell me, when it is that you got this report, did you not hear that Mr. Williams was claiming that he had an alibi? He was at his home with a toothache, and his landlord was there who could verify. Did you go to the house? No. The complainant identified all the clothes that the attacker was wearing, from jersey to pants to shoes. Did you go to the accused's house to examine if he had any of those? Answer, no. Did you check when you took his underwear and her underwear and you found that there was semen on her underwear? Did you get a check to make sure that the semen that was on her underwear belonged to him? No. So what investigation did you do? His response to me, the woman came and said she was raped, and that's all I needed. And he locked up the man, and the man spent 3 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. This is why I'm encouraging you to develop a professional attitude. We, the public, are demanding a professional attitude. We, the public, are demanding intelligent policing. We, the public, need to be satisfied that you are not going to act irresponsibly or maliciously. The public is taking very serious note of what the police do from day to day. I had a listener who called the program the other night to ask me if, Mr. Earl, you think it is fair for police to see a sign marked "Police, no parking"? You think it is fair for the policeman to park by that sign? So I said, what do you mean? His interpretation is that it means police cannot park there because it says police, no parking. His view was that civilians could park there, but that police could not park there. Interesting interpretation, but I'm saying that the public is calling the police to account. So, in that word is, the A stands for? Now, what's the next letter? C stands for courage. Be courageous. The strongest, most generous, and proudest of all virtues is true courage, according to Michel Montaigne. Commissioner Ellington, in repeating the 7 pillars of leadership character, identified courage as the response of facing and dealing with anything recognized as dangerous, difficult, or painful, instead of withdrawing. Now, if you look at someone like Senior Superintendent Derek Cowboy Knight, Senior Superintendent Radcliffe Lewis, ACP Clifford Blake, Inspector Alton Spencer, Superintendent Merrick Watson, Superintendent Cornwell Bigger Ford, what do they all have in common? The fact of the matter is that they are well respected by the public. And why? They are perceived as being very courageous. And so I implore you to be courageous. I was so proud last week when I heard about hostages who were held captive at their home in St. Andrew, Haining Mews. And an elite squad of police officers was able to go in and to storm and to retrieve them safely without a single shot being fired. That took courage. I was excited too when I heard about those men who held up a motorist in Vineyard Town and they were driving away. And they were being chased by the police. They broke many red lights and stop signs until the stupid driver went on South Avenue, ended up on a dead end in the Swallowfield area, and crashed the car. He got away. I'm sure he'll soon be found. But the other 3 passengers were all held by the police, again, without a single shot being fired. That took courage. And so, I encourage you to be courageous. According to the director of MOCA, the Major Organized Crime Anti-Task Force, Anti-Corruption Task Force, ACP Carl Williams, he says the security forces, and in particular police, face unique job hazards. On a daily basis, your job is fraught with physical and psychological danger. Research shows, in fact, that the risk of suffering a fatal incident as a police officer is 3 times as great as for all other occupations. You come face to face with murderers, robbers, perpetrators of the most heinous crimes, beheading, execution of women and children and the elderly. And there's a new group that you come face to face with, and they are called human rights activists. That's another group that you are going to have to deal with. So I encourage you, as you go out there, to demonstrate the courage regardless of the opposition that you face. It may mean that you have to stand tall, like Wyatt Earp in old days did, cowboy days did. You might be the person who has to stand tall to protect an accused who has rights from being mobbed and killed by residents. It may mean that you have to stand tall in relation to some of the personalities you meet on the road. One day I was going up to Jack's Hill and I was stopped in a police spot check. and they were looking at my papers and so on. And then they stopped another vehicle, a big spanking new SUV, tinted. And when they stopped it and the gentleman rolled down his window, they saw that it was a very prominent politician. And I was amazed to hear the conversation between the two police officers. Is you stop him, you know? You go deal with him. No, I'm not talking to him. You go deal with him. I deal with this man first. And so on and so forth, and it went. And the gentleman looked at the two of them and said, officers, what are you going to be doing? And they waved him along. Now, batch 101, you have to be courageous. It doesn't matter if that is the Prime Minister. If you are doing a job, you are doing a job. What you must make sure that you do is that you carry out the job with professionalism and with courage. So I encourage you to do that. So, A stands for, C stands for, and E, that's the next letter, that stands for ethics. And Inspector Spencer spoke of that. Every organization has rogue elements, whether it's politicians, whether it's the law. In my own profession, we have many members who have been struck off the roll of attorneys at law. And, of course, sadly, the police force. According to your ethics and integrity policy, ethics is defined as a set of principles of right conduct or the rules or standards governing the conduct of a person or the members of a profession. I like how ACP Justin Felice put it. He says integrity is doing something right even when no one is looking. That's the test. It's easy to do it when you're under the eyes of ACP Blake, or under the eyes of Superintendent Watson, or under the eyes of Inspector Spencer. It's easy to behave yourselves. But when no one is watching, that's the test that will determine whether or not you are a person of integrity. And what you want to be doing is to ensure that as persons of integrity, you protect brand JCF, because that's the brand you represent, brand JCF. Why is it so important to protect brand JCF? Why is it necessary to speak about ethics and integrity? Why does the JCF spend so much time and resources in terms of fighting corruption? The answer is to be found in your anti-corruption strategy 2012 to 2015, where it says that police service delivery may be severely crippled where the public loses confidence and trust in the very organization that is mandated to keep them safe and secure. So if people lose confidence and trust in you, it's all over. And that is why ACP Felice and his team has been very active in terms of making arrests for corruption. In fact, he shared some statistics with me last week. In 2010, there were 57 police personnel who were arrested for corruption, and 36 were charged. In 2011, that figure went up. It was 65 police who were arrested for corruption, and 41 who were in fact charged. And for this year, right up to June 30, 2012, 25 police have been arrested and 16 charged. And the year isn't finished. So you can see from that the anti-corruption branch is very busy. And if you don't want ACP Justin Felice and his team to pay you a visit, then my humble advice would be to make sure that you straighten up and fly right at all times. Now, What am I talking about? With ethics, avoid opportunistic theft, shakedowns, protection of illegal activities, traffic fix, misdemeanor fix, felony fix, kickbacks, direct criminal activities, police perjury. You hear what I said? In the words of SSP Radcliffe Lewis, listen me good. Listen me good. Police perjury. I was in a case called Brenda Edwards against the Attorney General. And Miss Edwards lived in St. Mary. And a group of police officers raided her house. And they said they had a warrant looking for stolen goods. They didn't have any warrant. And they didn't find any stolen goods. And she ended up suing the state for false imprisonment and for assault and battery. And at the end of the day, when we went to court, officer gave evidence about this warrant, and he produced the warrant that he said that he had on the day. Now, as I said, SSP Lewis said, listen me good. The incident, the actual search, took place on the 20th of November, the 22nd of November, 1988. That's the year of Gilbert, 1988. And this is what Mr. Justice Panton had to say in the judgment, as he then was. As you know, Mr. Justice Panton is now the President of the Court of Appeal of Jamaica. But this is what he said when he was a judge in the Supreme Court. I was most impressed by the evidence of the plaintiff and her daughter. They were clearly witnesses of truth. Regrettably, I can come to only one conclusion so far as the evidence of Sergeant X, not going to give you his name, the evidence of Sergeant X is concerned. That is, it is not to be believed. I have not come to that view lightly. I shall focus attention briefly on the so-called warrant, as therein lies the falsity of the defense. The warrant on the face of it is supposed to have been signed on November 20, 1989 by Mr. Y, Justice of the Peace for the Parish of St. Mary. It shows that it was endorsed on November 20, 1989 by Corporal X, as he was then, as having been executed on that date. So the warrant that has been produced as the authority for the search was signed by the Justice of the Peace 1 year after the search. I find without any difficulty whatsoever that there was no warrant in existence at the time of the search. And then Mr. Justice Panton went on to award damages in favor of the plaintiff. But towards the end of the judgment, he came back to it and did this particular statement. He called it his final comment on the warrant. It appears to me that Sergeant X has made a deliberate attempt to deceive the court. It is a deeply disturbing situation. I am disappointed that the Attorney General should have mounted such a palpably false defense. He should have concentrated his energies on investigating the serious irregularity involving the warrant. Now, I just share that with you to say why it is so important to pay attention to ethics. And you know the expression, knowledge is? Yes, well, erase that from your heads, because that is not so. Knowledge is not power. It is the application of knowledge that is power. So if you know something but you don't do it, It's of no use. It might as well you didn't know it. And that is why your code of ethics and your integrity policy is something I commend to you that you should know. Now, out there in the field, you're going to have some peers whispering all kinds of things to you. Peers. But in the words of Ben Carson, peers stands for people who encourage errors, rudeness, and stupidity. So be very careful how you take the word of your peers. Now, I just want to sum up by saying, whilst it is that we're talking about ethics in the broad sense, there is also ethics in the private sense. Right now, I have a claim dealing with for a client where a police officer owes rent for 9 months. That should never happen. That should never happen. I have spoken to this policeman several times. And every time I speak to him, he is on his way to say, Mr. Earl, I'm going to see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And he never shows. 9 months rental is owed. How could somebody, a member of your noble constabulary force, someone who has sworn to protect, to reassure, and to serve, be finding themselves in that position? So I encourage you in your private life also to be ethical. So in summary, the A stands for, and the C stands for, and the E stands for? Well, Batch 101, every one of you has the ability to rise through the ranks. I challenge you to be the champions of the new JCF and to set the pace with your ACE, attitude, courage, and ethics. As I leave this place to join the rat race, I shall not lose face, for with knowledge as my base and the Almighty's grace, I plead my case that through service I will not disgrace. Attitude, courage, and ethics I must embrace. I will make all proud as I have the ace. Batch 101, go out there and ace it. Good evening.